Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We balanced the federal budget. Yeah, I'm just kidding. That didn't happen. The question is why does it seem almost impossible to balance the federal budget? I mean, despite everything Elon Musk and Doge have identified since Donald Trump took office, and even after billions of additional revenue was coming into the federal government, the United States is still on track to post a budget shortfall of roughly $2 trillion this year. And that's the same budget deficit that existed in 2024 back when Joe Biden was still in the White House. Now, naturally, this has caused some people to become a little bit cynical. I mean, after all, what's the point of electing fiscal conservatives if they can't seem to do anything about the spending that they always complain about during campaign season? And this mentality is part of the reason Elon Musk and Donald Trump had their falling out earlier this year. But the thing is, both Elon and Trump kind of have a point. Yes, our federal debt is growing far too fast, and yes, Elon is rightfully upset that Republicans can't seem to get it under control. But at the same time, we're running into some major political problems here that make it impossible for Trump or almost any politician to do anything about the nature of federal deficits. And that has to do with why those deficits exist in the first place. Let's take a closer look at the problem right here on the US debt clock. This number shows the total amount of federal debt, and as you can see, it goes up by about $50,000 each second. And this number shows how much revenue the federal government collects each year. So as you can see, it's growing too, just not as fast as the deficit is. In fact, federal revenues are sitting at basically all-time highs, so it's not as if Washington, D.C. has a tax collection problem. Instead, it has a spending problem. And as you can see here, there's four main drivers of the federal debt: healthcare, entitlement programs, the military, and the interest on the debt itself. At over $1.6 trillion per year, Medicare and Medicaid are the single largest things the federal government spends money on. So much for the left-wing narrative that America doesn't spend any money on healthcare. And at $1.5 trillion, Social Security is the second largest item expense in the federal budget. Now, shockingly enough, coming in at third place is not the military, it's interest on the national debt itself, which has already surpassed more than $1 trillion a year. That's more than all military spending combined, which stands at more than $900 billion. And the military is actually a legitimate function of the federal government. Now, if all of that wasn't shocking enough, what do you notice about all of these numbers when you add them together? It's almost exactly equal to the total revenue the federal government brings in every single year. That's without factoring in anything else the government pays for, things like veterans benefits, transportation, education, scientific research, subsidies for dozens of different industries, the entire State Department, salaries for every member of Congress and their staff, and the list goes on. Now, some of those things arguably shouldn't even be done by the federal government to begin with. But these are essentially the only things that Congress and the president have control over because they're what's known as discretionary spending. Entitlements and welfare programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are what's known as mandatory spending, meaning that unless Congress takes the step to change the law itself, the federal government is locked into paying these things in perpetuity, no matter who's in office, and that's the trap. Mandatory spending eats up nearly every dollar the government takes in, while the rest gets charged the national credit card. And unless some bold politician out there is willing to touch the so-called third rail of American politics, which is welfare and entitlement programs, then deficits are going to increase. And that is why more and more economists are warning that nothing stops this train. Not because nobody cares about the deficit, but because almost nobody knows how to stop it without losing re-election. And ironically, that's actually just as big an indictment of the voting public as it is the politicians themselves. Because as Thomas Sowell once warned, when the people demand the impossible, only liars can suffice.